There's a problem at the foundation of Gundam Evolution, something that actually stands to do a lot of damage to it as a game. So, what is that problem? The problem is the game modes themselves. While they may have seemed fun and standard with a little bit of quirky twists to them, which they were, they actually have a lot of opportunity to do serious damage to Gundam Evolution if they're not changed. Starting with point capture. So point capture is actually the best designed game mode in all of Gundam Evolution. Now, if you told me that before I played in the test recently, then I would have told you that you were crazy. And that's because point capture, which is also called 2CP in other games like Overwatch, is actually considered the worst game type that you can actually play. It has huge problems with the games going for 30 minutes and then ending in a draw, with the final objective being just near uncapturable because people are constantly coming back and installing. And the whole gameplay basically goes by the offensive team having to just truck in through chokes and hope that they don't die. It's rough. It's fun to play in defense, but the pain of playing on offense just doesn't really make up for how fun it was to play on defense. So, like I said, it's the best one, but it still has issues. So, in a game like Overwatch, which is, a sister game to this game, something like Wrecking Ball changed 2CP a lot because it made stalls worse. So instead of just having the ability to swap over to a fast character that would jump onto the point and be poked out pretty quickly because they're squishy and die, like Tracer or Lucio, you have this demon hamster spinning around your point with 1200 HP, unable to be killed, just making games last forever. In higher elos, this isn't as much of a problem because people can focus it down, but at lower elos, it's just so much more difficult. It makes the games just never be fully capturable because you swap on a hamster, you sneak on a point, you just start spinning. So when your team lost the fight and you should lose the round reasonably, it doesn't matter, and all of that just kind of goes away. It's really silly. It's not the best design, but like I was saying, it kind of tells you about Gundam Evolution to say that that's the best game mode in Gundam Evolution. In Gundam Evolution in particular, the problem with this game mode is what I mentioned before, but it's even worse than that. Point capture maps, particularly the lunar base one, has issues with the choke points being like really, really, really hard, particularly on the first map. The first point of it. There is a single way that you can enter, and that is just miserable. They need to adjust that, but that's not that big of a deal. You need to have other places you can go through for different play styles and to just give options and to make the defensive team have to think and have to just not look at one single place. But the biggest problem with it is the way that every character in Gundam Evolution can move really quickly, even the slowest ones like something like GM. Even though it's slowest, it's still a lot faster than the slowest characters in Overwatch because it always has its dashes and always has its sprint. So unless they mess with the respawn times a lot or push the spawns back really far, which they're right next to the last objective, then you're just going to have way more game modes in towards stalling, and it's just going to be really, really irritating. So, yeah, that was the best game mode. It needs some slight adjustments. It's not a fundamental change you need to do. I mean, honestly, I don't really want it in the game. I mean, it's got to be there now because we can't be too far away from release at this point. So now to talk about Domination. So what exactly is the problem with Domination? Domination is a King of the Hill map, and I honestly found it quite fun. I thought the vertical maps, the ones where you have to travel forward to get to the objectives rather than them being laid out horizontally, was quite interesting. But it has a serious issue with the way that it's fundamentally designed. So the horizontal ones are the better designed of the two types. The vertical ones are less well designed because it makes certain fights and certain objective points worth a lot more. While they'll give you the same amount of progress towards winning the round, the ones that are further out can be fought on fewer times. So whereas objective A on the vertical map, you can fight for it maybe like in the 60 seconds you have to fight for it, you get the first fight, and then you're probably going to get at least like 3 more fights, like 3 more good fights where it's still worth it to like actually try and contest it, because people that are dying only take about 15 seconds to get back. So they die 15 seconds, die again 15 seconds. You can get about 3 consistent fights for it, whereas 3 to 4 You don't really want to fight for it the last time because at that point you're not getting any. You're gonna get like 5% progress, which is just not worth it. It's better set up for the next fight. But so like they're good fights, right? Where it's still worth to do it. Comparing that to C, which is the furthest one away, after that first fight, the enemy's going to get no more than another fight. They might not even really get that if it's a long and drawn out one, or you fight for a while, so that the timer has ticked down past like a decent amount past 60, like to 40 or so, 40 seconds remaining. Because it's going to take about like 30 seconds for people to really get back effectively if they're not on a really fast character. And just the way that with staggers work, there's just no good reason for why you'd lose the first fight on C and then try and get back to it only to fight for like 10%. It's just not worth it. So that's the first issue. I'm not going to complain too much about it. I kind of just like the way that it's vertical. I like the way that they changed it. It's still fair. So it's not really a problem. It just kind of makes it so certain fights are more worth it to take. For example, the fight on C, you're going to want to try and win that as much as possible. Whereas a fight on A is not as good to win. Because a fight on A, you're only guaranteeing yourself about 20 or about, 15% capture progress. Whereas a fight on C, you're guaranteeing yourself about like 40. So, numbers bigger. So yeah, you want to do that. And while that does give the game, it just gives the game a little bit of unnecessarily bias towards that section of the map. So yeah, moving on though. The biggest issue is the way that the timers actually work. So how it works is there's 30 seconds until the point unlocks. It randomly selects one. And then when it unlocks, it's up for 60 seconds. You can get about 50% capture progress on it if you capture it immediately. I think it's like 48%. So you need three basically full captures to win. But what happens is, once that's over, it goes back to 30 seconds of it being neutral and no one can capture it. And then another 60 seconds where you can capture it, the next objective. But the problem with what happens is when one team hits 99.9 percentile, if the other team captures it back, so it goes into extra time, the other team tries to capture it. If that happens, then instead of it being based on this, you fight for it, whichever team is better wins, controls it, the enemy comes back, they fight for it again, whoever's better controls it, and each team is getting a certain amount of percentage and it's worth a certain amount. What it does is it pauses the objective in that location instead of cycling it. So instead of having the opportunity to have a clean, completely neutral fight every few fights or so, every minute and a half or whatever, if I'm calculating that properly, instead of every minute and a half there being a neutral fight, there's no more neutral fights at all. And so what you can have is it be 99.9 to 0, and then the defensive team that's losing comes in and captures it. And then from there, they are only ever going to have to fight with a defensive advantage. If they lose, of course, then that's the round, and that's the round. But if they're winning, they continue to have the defensive advantage. Defensive advantage is a positioning advantage, and since these games are at least 70% positioning, it's a huge advantage. Particularly with the way that ultimates in this game work. There was just because of the way that the winning team in a fight gets more ult charge total, because the damage that the enemies that they're killing can't be healed up, and that difference can't be restored, and the fact that they're just dealing a total higher damage, they get an advantage. So what that means is they get their ults more frequently. Ultimates are very, very powerful in games like these. They allow you to secure an advantage. And on top of allowing you to secure an advantage, that leads into kills and that leads into winning fights, right? So with the way that the ults work, where the first team wins a fight, when they win a fight in a King of the Hill map, it gives them about 2 fights of expected wins. Just because of the way that the next fight, they're going to poke the enemy a little bit, the enemy's poking them, but then they're going to get ultimates first, they're going to use them first, and they're going to win that fight. The next fight after that, the third fight, they're still going to have an ultimate advantage. It isn't until the fourth fight that the team that originally lost has a real proper opportunity to win. Of course, things don't go in a perfect little thing like this all the time. But what it does do is it just about how the advantages work. So the team that is now coming in for their fourth fight, having lost the original one, they have the ultimate advantage now. So they can actually win the fight now, in like perfect terms. And then they win that one, and they win another one, and they win another one, and then they finally lose on their fourth fight. And so what does that mean for like what we're talking about here? The issue with that is that if the team one is losing or is winning, right, and they're 99.9, the other team has maybe like, I don't know, 30% or so capture progress. If they get if they get control of the position, now that it'll be overtime, it is staying on that 1 point, they have an ult advantage, or they will have an ult advantage usually. And so what that means is they can just stagger these fights consistently, and that means they just win if they play properly. It won't always go like this, of course, and this is talking about like really efficient high level play. But that's how it would go. So a team can be losing 25, they can only be winning like 25% of the whole game, and yet they can just win the round. They're just given like this huge advantage to then just go on and win, and it's honestly not fair. Ideally, you want these sort of game modes to be 100% fair, and this makes it not fair because the fights that the team one had to win were harder because they didn't have the advantage all the time. Whereas the fights that the second team, the losing team, has to win, they have the advantage. It's not that big of a deal on like point A of the vertical map because it's so close that the fight's just so scrappy and you're getting lots and lots of tries on it that it's just not really that big of a deal. And the defensive advantage on that map is not that good because you can flank really easily. But on something like C on that point, it's just basically a free win, to be completely honest. If you win that C fight, it's going to take them 30 seconds to get there. And so if you're at 30%, 30 seconds is worth about 25%. And then you're looking at 55%. And then since you have the ult advantage, you win that next fight. And then they're only going to have they're not going to be able to properly fully get back to the point to take these fights. Because of the way that it takes extra time to take the fight properly too. It takes about 10-15 seconds for a fight to actually occur. So you fight at 60, the fight takes till 50 seconds, then it takes them 25 seconds to get back, and so we're left with 25 seconds. And then if they win that next fight, they're only going to have 15 seconds to get back to the point. So maybe like 2 of them will be able to get there, and they just lose. So it's a huge, huge disadvantage, and it seems pretty innocuous overall. But when you actually look at it like this, it's just abusable. Teams that are just getting rolled, they can just hold all their ultimates and just plan and be like, all right, guys, we're intentionally playing to get them to 99.9% now. And then when they get to 99.9, we're going to capture it. We'll have a defensive advantage. We have 6 ults now, and we're just going to use 2 of them each fight, and we're going to beat them, and they can't stop it. So it's really, really, really abusable. And they need to change that. They need to make it so it continues to cycle, which might make things a little bit more dull if it cycles off and then the team that's at 99% just runs off and captures the point while the other team's not paying attention, and the game ends like that. But it's just a much, much better system overall. All right, so Domination might have seemed like it had some issues, and it does, but they're not as fundamentally bad as Demolitions. Demolitions are technically balanced, but it's just so bad that it's worse, okay? So basically what the issue with that is that it's extremely, extremely attack favored. People may not have noticed this because, everyone was new to the game, and the rank system wasn't stratified properly, and there's people playing on the wrong server accidentally, and there's people playing in large groups and stuff like that, whatever. But what it does is, at a very high level of play, it is impossible for the defense to defuse. Of course, obviously, I'm talking about the high level of play, so the top level players will feel this the worst, but everyone will notice it eventually. And the lower level, mid-tier players will hear the top level players hearing about it when they're watching them stream, so it's going to be a serious issue. So basically what it is that if 6v6 of a pro team versus a pro team are playing against each other, the defense absolutely cannot defuse when they're planted on. That is because you can stop a defuse effectively if only 2 or 3 of your people on your team are alive. If you have better ults, you need even fewer people than that. Because all you have to do is you only need to kill the guy that's defusing, or you need to stun him. You don't actually have to kill 6 people, so it's not a full proper fight. It's like the team that has 6 people is constantly having a serious weakness that you can target. The way that this game is designed, with the fact that every character is really, really fast, means when they die, they respawn really quickly. It also means that they can run away, and they can hide easier. So when you plant the bomb, the team that's planting can all just, run away from each other and get in safe positions and watch the bomb. As soon as the enemy team comes into defuse, because they can't possibly hunt everyone down and kill them, it would take too long. You're too fast. You're too sneaky and nimble. And when you do kill somebody, they will respawn and come back too fast. So they have to go for the defuse. But the offensive team can just listen for that or pay attention. And as soon as they come in for the defuse, they just jump in, blow up whoever's defusing, and then run away. They will have ultimates to use. You can have a character like Barbatos that'll just slam through somebody so they can't body block it. Which you can do with characters like Sazabi for regular hit scan damage, but you can't do it against a Sazabi, or like a Barbatos ultimate, or an Ashimar ultimate, or a Zaku ultimate. So you can't use that, right? So there's just no effective way to block it. And since there's 2 objectives, you can't stop them from planting consistently. You have a huge disadvantage on that just to start with. So not only do you have a huge disadvantage to stop them from planting, which would be okay if there was better way, if the plant was if the defuse was a neutral fight, but it's not. Just the way that there's a timer, and then as soon as that timer hits 0, if they're not defusing, then it blows up. That is a serious issue. If it was something like there was a small area around the defuse area, like an objective, and if you were standing on that, it wouldn't end even if you weren't defusing at that time, then that would make things more balanced. That means that at the 0 second, the offensive team would have to make a fight, would have to win a fight to cause that bomb to blow up. But with the way it is, all you got to do is listen. They try and defuse. That drops at least one person from being able to focus, because that guy's defusing. He literally can't do anything. So now it's a 5v6. So you go in, you blow up that guy because he can't move, probably get another person and leave, and now it's like a 4v6. And even if they're trading kills with you, they're just never going to be able to stop you from sneaking in at the last moment. You can delay it and force him to not be able to get a proper, safe defuse, quote unquote, every 20 to 15 seconds. And so maybe they get 4 attempts, right? But all you need to do is you need to just reconvene, blow up that person, run away. Reconvene, blow him up, run away. Come back, blow them up, go away. And as soon as it gets into overtime and they're defusing, if you even stun them, that's that. It's over, and the bomb blows up. So that's actually a serious issue. It's basically one of the 3 game modes in the whole game just shouldn't even exist. It's literally just unplayable at a high level. It's just so abusable. It might as well be a coin toss at that point. It's just about who can abuse the mechanics of it more rather than who are better players. So that really needs to be looked at. Because like I said, super abusable. And while the average player might not be able to, the average player's team won't take advantage of it, even if they do know about it. So for them, it might not feel like a big deal, but they'll definitely notice it. I mean, I even notice it just playing in my standard matches without coordinated teams. I just noticed how frustrating it was to just not for them to be able to 1v6 you at the end and just stop you from defusing because of what they had and what ults they had and stuff like that. Really frustrating. All right, so I had some miscellaneous things I need to talk about that aren't actually about the game modes 100%. So starting off, the first thing I wanted to say was they need to change the clunkiness of some of the abilities in the game. I think it was intentional, to be honest, but basically every ultimate, Sazabi's Tomahawk, GM's C4, GM's Heal Nade, they all are just kind of they're just awkward, They don't travel as far as they should. They don't move as fast as they should. They're just not consistent. Like Tomahawk has the tiniest hitbox ever, and it has a really delayed throwing animation, so it's really, really strange. GM's healing grenade can't be used on anything other than like 5 feet away from it because it's so slow. So that needs to be looked at. And for some of the things, they need to look at like why, for example, why does Gundam's bomb disappear? Why does its super napalm disappear when it dies? Like, I get it for certain things like standard projectiles, just because you don't always want something to be trading when it dies. But super napalm goes out, the Gundam goes out, goes to poke some damage out, and then gets headshot by a GM, and then its ult just goes away. Like, I had times where my Marase ult was out and it was just traveling and it was going to frag 6 people, and then I got downed, but it just disappeared, and I didn't get anyone with it, and it was really, really just like, you can play around it, but it's just inconsistent and frustrating. Makes the game feel more inconsistent. So they need to look at that thing, that portion too. But that's not like a huge issue. It's just something that can clean the game up. But the other thing that I was noticing is that unlike a game like Overwatch, when you play on the second round of Demolition and point capture, so both teams capture the point fully, both sides get 50% ultimate charge. I think that's to make the game like feel more consistent and faster with the ability to actually get your ultimates. But what that actually does is it does 2 things. The first thing it does is it makes the game more random and it makes it last longer. Instead of having the consistency of a defensive advantage with position and then the offense having to break that defensive advantage without any ultimates, because you don't have your ultimates, so you aren't able to just like break through things that you could with ultimates, and you can't just do more than you maybe should be able to. You have to play really well, and you have to structure your attacks and your coordinate and path correctly and all that. But with the ultimates, since you start at 50%, it means you're very likely going to get them, and then all hell is going to break loose when you use them. And so instead of having like these hard fought first point captures of like 50% or something like that, where it was based purely on mechanics, you're gonna have a lot more times where the attacking team gets their ultimates, and then they walk in, everyone just pops all their ultimates because basically everyone's gonna have it, and then who knows what's gonna happen, and then maybe they capture the point, and maybe they run to the second point, and then they just snowball because people are losing it mentally after they just lost the point, and it just makes the game way more random, and it makes it last a lot longer. So instead of having these like close fights down to like 50%, where then the offense now goes and has 50%, it just makes it more random and makes the games last a lot longer, and you don't really need it. There's no reason to try and set up a way in which every game of Demolition and point capture go to the second round, because they don't need to, because a full game playthrough of that is like 1 round. You don't need these extra rounds. It's basically just like the original first set of rounds didn't do well enough to decide which was a better team, but you played the full game mode, so you want to end it like as quickly as possible, and you don't want these like 30-minute games and someone loses. It's really, really frustrating. Or they go to a draw, and then you're sitting there and you're like, oh wow, 30 minutes of my life, we got a draw. Really cool. And so the second effect of that is it actually gives an advantage to the team with less time. So if you have a situation normally where the first team that attacks only has about 2 minutes to capture the first point, they maybe will get some ultimates up. Maybe not, right? Versus the other team with 4 minutes, since they played well and they finished faster, they deserve this advantage of basically having a guaranteed opportunity to get ultimates and a guaranteed chance to make the ultimate fight, like to get the ultimate fight that has a higher chance of them winning. But with the way that it's designed, the team that didn't play very well gets that advantage too. So yeah, that's the core issue, is that it just makes it less skill-based and more random. Allows for more snowballing and things like that. Make sure to check out these mobile suit guides I made for all 14 current mobile suits. I talk about when to play them, how to play them, strengths and weaknesses. Make sure to check them out, guys. They are pretty lit, if I say so myself.